Someone wanted.
We live?
We are now.
Marvellous, thank you. Good morning, everybody. We are going to kick off this morning with a karakia from Chief Executive.
Kia hora te maringa, kia whakapapa pōna te moana, he hui rahi mā tātou I te rangi mai. Aroha atu, aroha mo e tātou kātou. Uye tāi kia.
Apologies this morning from Councillor Duncan, and then we have Lynley, Martin and Neil joining us on the line, and Sarah. Lynley may have to duck out at some point, so just keep an eye out, she may come and go. I'm happy to move that we receive those apologies, and Tracy is happy to second those. Thank you very much. All those in favour?
Aye.
Again, carried. No public forum. Yeah, maybe next time. Perfect. Confirmation of minutes from the ordinary council meeting on the 26th of March and extraordinary council meeting on the 31st of March, run from page 7 through to 17. Has anybody got any comments, additions, amendments to any of those? Nope. Oh, someone happy to move that those are accurate. Thank you, Cheryl. Second and thank you, Ian. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Declarations of interest begin on page 18. I know we've looked at them several times this month, but just for everybody to keep an eye on it. I also look at everybody else's too to see what you're up to with that. But keep them updated for my interest.
I will have a conflict of interest in item 25.6.2, I'd imagine.
Yes, I would imagine you would. Are you happy to note that?
Yeah.
We will stand aside from this next report, which is the new Fast Track Act requirements. Louise, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Madam Chair.
I'm not sure whether I maybe need to declare that, given that they are poking around in the back of our place.
You?
I'll just declare that.
Yeah. Good morning. The report came to you in December 2024 that gave you a high level rundown of the process of the Fast Track applications under the Fast Track Act. This report provides a little bit more detail and is more specific to the application of Matakanui Gold in Tāne Mine. Matakanui Gold Limited have contacted us, and we have been in a number of discussions around the proposed mine, and they have indicated that they're likely to lodge an application in late April at the earliest. So we have had a number of conversations. The Act provides that they consult with us before they lodge, so it's not really clear what that consultation is, but we are in discussion and we've asked for a little bit more detail so that we can get ourselves ready when the application comes in. We don't have a lot of time, there's 20 working days once it's lodged, and it will be a significant application that we get to get our key issues report completed and lodged with the EPA. So we've got some experts ready to go in terms of landscape ecology and acoustics. And we, as I said, we are in discussions around when we might get more detail. And there's some areas they'd like to consult under the RMA as well to get going, but we're in conversation of that as well. I have had a meeting with the Otago Regional Council. We've set up a panel in there, set up a team in their office to deal with this, and they have also got experts ready to go. So you'll see that the report is proposing that we nominate a person to the expert panel. So local authority gets to do this. Otago Regional Council are likely to do this as well, but they're not in a position yet to put somebody up, but there will only be, it's our understanding, there will only be one person. So we are proposing the chair of our hearings panel because of his significant experience in RMA matters and on the hearings panel and locally consenting in this district. And the other recommendation we have is that a councillor to sign off our key issues report before we lodge it, because we won't have time to get it back to full council, and it's just to keep things moving. The other option, if we don't do that, is a retrospective approval, but that will mean that there's been no councillor eyes over our response. And that's probably it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, any from online? Is there anything that
The only comment I have is I endorse the recommendation, because Neil will be very good at that role with his previous experience and all these things.
Fully agree.
is there anything that you wanted to add to this, Peter?
No, not at this point.
And
Seriously, I had a question on page 24. Where the sentence says, for the Bendigo Ochre and Gold application, council is likely to engage specialists on landscape ecology and acoustics. This will be reviewed once the application is received. I had two questions around that. One is transport and transport matters an important enough issue to maybe think about having it as a, because there's only considerable.
For the road itself, they are proposing a road stopping and an alternative route, but that isn't covered under the fast track. So while this was supposed to be one-stop shop in the station, that would have to go through an alternative route, either potentially Public Works Act or Local Government Act, and there's Crown Minerals Act implications with that as well. So we will be dealing with that to decide. And we can give consideration to traffic management as well, but we may well, obviously we have our roading engineer, and they're already looking at roading matters, they may well feed into that report.
Right, yeah. And
I think that's probably, less the Thompson's Gorge track and more the impacts for Ardgour Road, Bendigo Loop Road, some of those other carriageways and intersections from the state highway.
it's just an important enough issue to you think of these inside heading.
Yes, and they'll certainly be reviewing the application and the proposals around roads and intersections, when it comes in.
And within the submission process, where does discussion of remediation and mitigation?
It's in that process, though one of the things we'll be looking very carefully at is rehabilitation of the land and getting a bond. So that bond would be, in the event the company default on rehabilitation, we could pick up that money and do the work ourselves. I think it's likely to be, we'll be likely to promote something like an annual compliance check and review of bonds so that they're on top of. We're not going to get to the very end, we're looking at it as it goes through.
Because my view is that some kind of bond and the conditions you place upon it are really quite critical. Without going into detail, in terms of having bond money held and escrowed in independent accounts, and the conditions around how that money is collected and spent, and responsibility as a whole. It's quite a big piece of work, and I presume there'll be examples that will be available from other.
Yes, so it is our practice here that we apply conditions around bonds and rehabilitation. This is a significant scale, and we're likely to get some expertise on that matter as well. As our Otago Regional Council, we've had a discussion with them around that.
Will be lead conditions proposed as part of the key issues report.
Yes, and you get an opportunity to review conditions as well. So we'll be approaching this from a effects district plan approach, but also seeking to get the best conditions we can for the best outcomes for the community, because we appreciate this going to leave a significant mark on the landscape, so we will apply appropriate conditions to the construction.
Any other questions? Yes. We've had a lot of support for Councillor Gillespie for recommendation B. Recommendation C was considering nominating 1 or 2 councillors to approve council's comments, recognising that this will require quite a substantial amount of effort over a very short space of time. I'm happy to be one of those people. I just wondered if Sarah is still there, whether that might be something that you are interested in, Sarah, given that you are the community representative for the Terrace area on the community board. But if you feel that you don't have the time, or if anybody else is particularly keen on being a part of that, please.
Sarah says yes.
Sarah says yes, right? Is anybody else wanting to be a part of that? So on that then, are we happy if the council endorses the proposed process for responding to the applications under the Fast Track Approvals Act, recognising that we've only got the one currently? Nominates Councillor Gillespie. Do you want to leave all suitably qualified individual in there just in case, for whatever reason, Neil can't fulfil that at the time, or can we just remove that and leave it?
We can remove that.
Okay, perfect. Nominates Councillor Neil Gillespie to the expert panel to consider the application for the Bendigo Over Gold project under the Fast Track Approvals Act. Nominates myself and Councillor Sarah Brown to approve council's comments, key issues report for the Bendigo Over Gold project under the Fast Track Approvals Act. That will come back to this table as well, but they'll be retrospective.
I'm happy to second.
If NA receives the report and it's a level certificate, so
Just
let's move everything down.
Accepts the level of significance. Thank you. Wayne will pop that up.
Yep.
Thank you.
We can see it.
And it'll be himself as well, and do.
Oh, okay. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Online too?
Martin was happy to move that. Someone happy to second it? Thank you, Nigel. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carries. And then moving to page 28, Southern Water Done Wow.
That's not nothing more one.
Yeah, done, comma, well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I know, so we can fill by joining us at 11. Yeah. So we've got 10 minutes where we can discuss this, and if you have any questions that I or Julie can answer, then fire away. We've got the team from Marsden Road joining us who have done worked on the financial documents. Who else is joining us, Bob?
It's the Mayor Morrison and also Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew Strahan, he's the project director, but all the 4 councils have engaged to manage the project. Julie Saskia, part of the project working group. I'm on the steering group, and obviously the mayor is on the mayoral executive group. There's a lot to this. We're at the point where all councils now in this group are taking this paper to their councils this week. I think Gore is taking it next week to their council. And then the outcome of that will then shape the consultation document that will be drafted collectively. But we will all then take out to the communities over the 9th of May to the 6th of June. And it'll be a single consultation document that will reflect everyone's position, and we'll go out and consult. And I'm happy to take any questions as it is. The supporting information is worth having a look at, because it's making the case. And, you know, in all practical sense, what we currently do is not going to be fit for purpose. We don't have the staff, we don't have the expertise. We've not worked in that regulatory environment where you have the Commerce Commission breathing down your neck and the Taumata Arawai, because what we will see, as Marlon said to us when he came to us, it will be intensive and it will be intrusive. So let's dispel the myth that we can continue to do what we currently do. We cannot. But option 2, a separate council CCO, might have some benefits. And then obviously option 3, which is the staff recommendation, and it's the recommendation of all the councils at this point in time, is that the third way to go is to establish a regional, work towards establishing a regional CCO, consulting on that and asking the community for their thoughts. Happy to take questions, and Julie's here for all the technical stuff.
I did have a question when Marlon was here. He indicated that you could establish a CCO relatively affordably, and I see that they're putting 13.8 million in the budget for establishment, and I just wonder, do you think that is realistic, or?
Morrison will be here, so they'll be able to answer that question directly. Now, there's some basis to that. So first and foremost, we're all using different asset management systems, and when you have a utility like that, and the Electricity Commission and all that, and maybe Neil could talk to this, is you need a single system that can tell you the state of your assets, that then you can make informed decisions, and then those over time, your decision making and your affordability will be better because you've got a much more rigorous. All the 4 councils don't have asset management systems of varying degrees, so that's why if you come together, there's a significant investment needed in an enterprise system that runs your assets and runs the financials. That's what's lacking. So a large chunk of that would be that cost. But Morrison will be here and they'll be able to talk to that. In a single council CCO, they've sort of estimated it's probably in the range of 3 to 4 million. I think Marlon's saying, you know, you could probably do it cheaper, but conservative numbers that they're putting there. They don't want to underestimate it, because if it turns out that it is expensive and we've underestimated the cost, that cost will be a capital cost to the project as well. So it would be something that will be put onto the debt of the water services entity if we were to go down that path. So it's not something that this council would pay for, and we all would pay for it as a community if the water services entity was to do that, because we'd pay that in whatever billing arrangements they come to.
Yeah, I had another question. Just under the recommendations, they said to strengthen the confidence in the financial projections, council should commit to a memorandum of understanding or similar to align cost estimation methodologies. So is that also something that you're discussing with the other councils?
That again, I would the Morrison Low would be a good one to ask that too, because that's their view. The agreement that we've got will take us to the 1st of July 2027. And so it's a pretty good agreement, and there's a good unity of effort around the table with the mayors, and there's a pretty well a collegial aspect. So if the mayors believe there is merit in something like that, and it's not currently catered for in the agreement, then that's something that could be done. That was a Morrison Road recommendation.
I had a question on page 31 under harmonised pricing strategy. And I know maybe I think there's a typo in there. We've got the word principle, but it's the wrong principle. But my question is, I just wondered, Julie, whether you could, I didn't understand what they were saying actually. Modelling has indicated that through the preservation of local prices, the Southern WSE and ensure lower household charges for ratepayers in all districts. Operate under the financial principle that no water consumers pay more than they otherwise would have under a council delivery model, which seems to be a rather heroic thing to be hoped to establish. But it doesn't actually talk about harmonised prices, just because my understanding is harmonised prices mean everyone pays the same, but that's not
It
so.
does, and some of the councils are more interested in price harmonisation than others.
I just understand what that paragraph is saying, actually.
Yeah, so it was saying that there would be a commitment from the entity that no community or no water consumer are going to be paying more than if we had kept it in-house. So you wouldn't be saying we're going to harmonise our prices at the end of year one and everybody will pay the same if it meant that Central Otago was going to end up paying a lot more than we would have paid if we'd kept it in-house. So we want to be really clear that nobody would be worse off going into this than they would have been if
At year one.
No, for the whole intention of organising this, but once it's in an entity, it'll then be part of our statement of expectation that when price harmonisation might, if it does occur, a decision's not been made that will be for down the track when the entity is established.
So if no one will pay more than they otherwise would have, that can only be established in year one, and year two, you're in a hypothetical.
No, that was just
Sorry?
that's just me saying, for example. So no, the whole intention of this, of going in together, is that nobody's going to be worse off. Period.
All
So
I'm
not in year one or year two, or we're not going to say you're going to be better off for the first 3 years and then worse off for the next 4. The whole intention of going together is that you won't be worse off. And if we were looking at the projections, and Morrison Lowe might have some insight into some of those because they have gone out. Although, as you say, once you go beyond sort of year 5 or 6 or 7, then once you start getting out to 20 or 30 years, it's actually really plucking feathers, isn't it?
Well, so harmonisation isn't really the right word here.
Well,
It's one thing
it might be harmonisation down the track, but we don't know that yet. But it's not going to be harmonisation if one community is going to be worse.
I understand that, but no one was going to be worse off, and you can only really say that for year one, year two, you're already guessing. Year 3, you're guessing more. Year 4, you're guessing. What I'm really asking is, if a regional entity set prices that were the same for everyone within the entity, providing that that was less than they would have paid if they'd stayed into business as usual, is that intention or is the intention to say, yep, at year 1 you're not going to be paying more than you otherwise would have. Forget about year 2, 3, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be harmonised prices. There'll be different prices for different districts. It's just like districtisation. Either you have an objective that says we're going to harmonise prices to every consumer within our entity, and by the way, we'll make sure that districtised price is not more than you would have otherwise paid, or you're also saying something different.
Yes, that's kind of what we're saying. Theoretically, price harmonisation would make sense down the track, but only if financially it's going to work and fit in with this financial principle that they've put as an indicator.
So really the answer is, one of the aims is not harmonisation.
Well, we haven't established the entity yet, so you couldn't say what the aim was going to be yet because we haven't had that discussion. We could say, as our letter of expectation from all the full councils, that the intention of this entity is price harmonisation, but we have not had that discussion yet.
Right.
We're not that down the track. But you could say we want price harmonisation by year 5, or you could say we never want price harmonisation, or you could that to be discussed down the track.
And Stu has a little bit more detail that you can provide.
Yeah, I actually think, Tammy, you probably covered it off beautifully at the end there. So what I would say in terms of the way we've developed that report and what we're trying to say is that we believe if you look across the country, and in fact if you look at some of the councils in this model, that price harmonisation is something that eventually an entity may want to get to. But what we are suggesting in the report is that in the Constitution and the Statement of Expectations, we would have a requirement that the entity sets its prices on that principle that no one pays more than they otherwise would have for the same level of local investment. And our modelling shows that that can happen pretty much in perpetuity, because the entity actually is able to leverage the ability of it. It's able to leverage its balance sheet better. It's also able to actually achieve some efficiencies of scale. And in fact, if you've seen the concept reporting consulting report, their suggestion is that our estimates of efficiencies are probably too low. What we're saying though is by embedding that principle, the entity is going to be bound by that principle, so it won't be able to move to a harmonised price until such point as it believes that it can satisfy that criteria. That may be in 5 years' time. I don't think it will be from our modelling, but we don't know because, you know, as you've rightly pointed out, investment uncertainty obviously increases over time. It could be in 15 years, it could be in 30. We don't want to bound the entity to a particular time frame. We want to make sure that we are giving the entity the ability and flexibility to set its pricing as best it can, but reflecting that there is this tension that we can't end up with a model that's going to cost our ratepayers more. Hopefully that's covered it a little bit, but I'm here for questions. So
it does explain it better, but there is a difference between saying that no one's going to be paying more, and we might look at harmonisation down the track. There's a big difference between saying that and saying from the get-go that one of our core principles is that we are aiming for harmonised pricing through the entity.
That certainly wasn't, if that's how it reads in the report, that wasn't intended, so that might need to be revised.
Well, all I'm suggesting is I would have thought it was a matter of discussion for this council, or maybe the other councils, as to whether we would wish to have as an objective, as an aim, stated aim, that we seek to achieve harmonised pricing through a new entity.
And that's absolutely a choice for all of the constituent councils to make and agree.
I'd assume that we'll be having some follow-up conversations once the consultation process has been through its process, and we make our decision, and those sort of factors will come into the final decision. I'd imagine we're going to have a decision that's got a number of resolutions that might set out, here goes our statement of expectations or whatever we're going to go from the get-go, and we'll pick it up as part of that, or am I on the wrong track?
No, it could be like that.
Yeah, all I'm really saying is that word harmonise isn't strictly correct in the context of that paragraph.
Yeah.
There's a separate issue to be discussed somewhere, I would have thought.
There could have been an additional paragraph with that says, in the future, harmonisation may be where the WSC would like to get to.
Or you may make it stronger.
Yeah, could make it stronger. But
and that's the matter to be discussed somewhere.
That's right. And that's something that if there was general agreement across the 4 councils, that's something that we could weave in and come down from consultation. We can weave into the Water Services Development Plan.
Thank you.
Sorry, would it follow then that people in their submission process might say we think this is a great idea, but we want to see it no harmonisation or all harmonisation? They might come and give us that view. Or that's a possibility, isn't it?
Yep.
June.
You know, all of these are forecasts based on information available for each council at a point in time. So over a period of time, those assumptions are going to change somewhat. And so it may be that it might just be a more deal coming together as you build in the efficiencies. Might find some of them start to so harmonisation becomes less of an issue. It's when you're looking that you might be quite different.
Yes, and what I might add is that some of our partner councils haven't yet districtised their water. And so potentially harmonisation is a massive thing.
Yeah,
lots of different aspects within each council and.
But stating the problem,
challenges.
I think explicitly is quite important.
Quite, yeah, absolutely. I'll reinforce that with the CEs when we meet next week.
And I would also like to be really clear for anybody else that's joining us online that the option that we are looking to potentially approve as the preferred option, which is a joint CCO, does not result in our water services, our water infrastructure being owned by anybody else. The council would own the entity together with the other councils. So the idea that it was going offshore or any of the other like is inaccurate.
It's probably worth clarifying too that councils own the entity and the entity will own the assets, is that right? It's not a Wellington water line that we're talking about here, it's a different structure that enables the entity to operate on each.
I have another question.
Go on.
So within the recommendations, there are listed as there is one mention of stranded assets, but my question is really, I would have thought it was possible, or no, is it possible with stranded assets by which keeping it confined to CODC, if we go to a regional entity, we've taken away a third of this organisation, and this organisation has fixed overheads that are now going to be spread over an organisation 2/3 of the size of what it is at the moment. And I would have thought that was a figure that could be quantified and built into the financial modelling, but I might be wrong.
Andrew is online and Stu, do either of you have a comment to make on that one?
I can comment on that to some extent, and then it also might be something that you can also elaborate on, Peter. But you're absolutely right. There is an overhead that is borne by the entire organisation that is charged across to the Three Waters activities. What we're unable to do at the moment, and we have done this work in the past, but it's actually quite a significant piece of work, is the amount of stranded cost or stranded overhead that's going to be within that in your organisation doesn't just relate to the amount of overhead that's charged to that activity. To really understand that overhead, you need to look at the balance between effort and where the actual costs are, and those two things aren't always perfectly aligned in an overheads model. So we would need to really be able to actually determine that, because every council has a different approach to determining how they allocate overheads out across their organisation. You would actually need to do a relatively in-depth piece of work looking at the alignment between effort and overhead allocation across your organisation to figure out where some of that cost might transfer and where it may not. I think one of the key things that we've noted in that report, though, is certainly in the outset, given the size of the entity, there should be opportunities for it to be able to procure some services from council and be able to return some of that cost back. And one of the areas where there will also be cash flows from the entity to council would be that the entity will be required to pay rates on its assets as well. So there will be a line of revenue that actually comes back to council that will also help to offset some of that stranded overhead. We did discuss, we have discussed and considered opportunities for the entity to reimburse council for overheads, stranded overheads. That was generally the advice that we provided, at least in relation to that, was that effectively by doing so, you're shifting cost from the general ratepayer onto water consumers, which may not be the same group, but also that entity needs to be set up to succeed, and by putting in those kind of mechanisms, it just starts to become very complicated and starts to add financial cost into a space where it's still there for your ratepayer if you're looking at a ratepayer that's also a water consumer, but it's not necessarily something that we thought in principle should be transferred over to the entity, because then you start looking at, well, how long do we continue to make those payments for before we rely on the council to also go through a process of looking at itself and figuring out where it can make savings.
And I guess that's one of the things that our CFO has highlighted in the past, that if water were to move on that 1 July 2027 date, there would be the opportunity for a great financial reset. I don't know what you would call it, a substantial amount of work, Paul, perhaps. But that, given that date lines up with the start of a new long-term plan, that would really create the ability to look at how we do things and how that time.
And we'll have the benefit to, there's quite good collaboration with the people that are supporting us and who are working with other councils. So there'll be other councils and groups that will be established faster than we will be, that we will be able to see how they have managed as part of the process as well. So we'll be able to learn from what others are doing.
So it's heartening that there are some pathways to actually recover some of those.
Yes.
And on that, as part of the modelling, do they do something as simple as saying, well, at the moment we've got 4 councils who employ a total of X number of staff in this area, and if we have a regional entity, we anticipate we'll have staff numbers of Y instead of X, and what are the potential savings or non-savings in terms of staffing? Is the financial modelling made any assumptions around staffing levels?
At an organisational level, we've considered staffing at a very high level in terms of what organisational support structure it might need, and the staffing the combined water staffing that would be there. At an individual council level, we haven't delved into say what would your remaining staffing requirement look like or anything like that.
Julie's got a comment on
Yeah,
the next one.
so if you recall, the DIA spoke with us, and I've heard it repeated a number of times, that the cost savings that occur in this process are not around staffing, because the volume because the capital programs have to ramp up, and the operational, the professionalism around operations has to increase. You're not going to make savings in staff. You won't get the level of increase that you would get if you stay on the run. There's a lot of staffing requirements to meet the new regulations and to do reporting to the new regulators and the Commerce Commission. So you're not going to see changes in staff going down. We might see a reduction in staff going up, and the cost savings from this sort of a model are not around the staffing, it's around the improved productivity and procurement gains that you achieve through those capital delivery programs and operations contracts.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julie. Any other questions? Tracy?
Just probably more a comment or directed at other team members in the room potentially. This is a really complex issue, trying to be bundled down into going to our community in a simple way. We've said it around this table a million times before that the government has told us that the in-house business unit, staying as we are, business as usual, is not an option, but we still do have to go to the community with that as an option. I am concerned that the fear from the community about change is going to be quite real, and trying to, I think about people say, well, don't do anything different because that's what we want you to do. That's not an option, and I don't know how we're going to give our community assurance that everything that we're putting here, and they've got to try and wrap their heads around it in a short period of time, which is, I understand why, but have we got, I hate the word cheat sheet, but is there going to be something simple that people can pick up and say, instead of reading hundreds and hundreds of pages and big Morrison Lowe reports and all that, because that's what they're relying on us to do around this table, but have we got something that the community can actually say, this is where we're going to hang our hats?
Yes, we do, and they're going to be so excited to know it's a consultation document. So hot on the heels of our current long-term plan consultation document will come a local water done well, Southern Water Steering Group, whatever we're going to put on the cover, consultation document that will be the same across the 4 councils if they all take this pathway. Clutha have said that yes, they will go out with this as their preferred option. Why Taki have probably made their decision now. They
doing that this morning as well. And it will be a joint consultation document together with a video that will be put together from the four mayors to talk about it, and then we will have and they're doing an FAQ page as well, because the idea that people are going to go away and read the 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 pages that we have read to make their decision, they're not going to have time for that. So there will be a separate consultation document where it's broken down, the pros, the cons, the benefits, potential negatives, all of that sort of thing will all be in there and will be available for everybody to see. And we are just looking at the moment as to what our public meetings, sessions, drop-ins might look like, so that we can make sure we reach as many people as possible.
And because actually for 3 of the 4 councils, we're right in the middle of our long-term plan engagement and heavy consultation document, that actually our respective staff say actually have no capacity for this. So we have engaged a communications support and has been actively working with the mayors, chief executives and the working groups, and have been on this for the last 3 to 4 weeks. Pending the decisions that councils make today, they will be full on into creating a document which sort of, it's not in technical order speak or trying to put it into a framework that people can readily digest, which is actually going to be very difficult because it is a complex. We won't be able to distill it down to 1 page and no 3 type thing.
I get that, but it's just making sure that it is in a format. And I look, that's going to involve some pretty clever thinking around that on a really complex matter.
Just where was that? Don't you think it's just a tad strange that the government has actually given this direction that you've got to consult on status quo or what you're currently doing, yet it's not an option. So why on earth are you going out there confusing the public with something that they can't have anyway?
Because it is, but the legislation is quite clear. The legislation says you have to consult on 2 options, one of them being the status quo. We're consulting on 3 because actually the single council CCO is a better option than the status quo. Not much better, but it is better.
So how do we get that out and make that very clear that actually, because if they see the status quo, you could imagine that a lot of people say, you know, like Tracy's saying, we don't want change.
That's right.
Well, if you dangle that carrot in front of them, they're going to want it.
The language, and this is where the status quo is not a good term. It's more like an in-house business unit, because the status quo would not meet the regulatory requirement. So the status quo is what you might know now, but amped up for staffing, separate financials, and quite a rigorous separation of function within the existing council. So how we explain that, so people, it's not what we do now. It's going to be a completely different beast.
To the point that there's even a completely separate set of options. So it's not councils. I think it's brilliant. What I have heard, the things I've been attending with the DMA, I've done analysis. There is about 20 councils across New Zealand who could do it on their own. So for them, there's an in-house business unit option that would work for them. They believe that there's 20 councils across New Zealand that just don't have that, are not big enough and don't have the deep capacity to be able to do it on their own, and so actually in the middle that are a bit grey. So I guess when they set legislation, they're setting it for everybody. So there is some councils where an in-house option will work for them.
Our neighbours.
They tend to be big city councils.
Question from Neil.
It's a bit of a follow-up to what Tracy was saying, I think, as much as a question. The simple reality of this is absolutely and utterly as complex as I've ever come across with what we're proposing to do. So we're going to do our level best to engage with our community on the back of a long-term plan as well, or somewhere almost alongside, to get their views. And ultimately, though, it's going to be hard to make sure that everybody understands what's being proposed here, and there will be a lot of people that will say, I don't see why it should change. They'll be worried about the fact that it's all of a sudden amalgamation. Now look at the comment out there about regional deals and the lack of understanding from within our community about that. In fact, probably the lack of understanding from everybody else that's involved in it as well, because it's so complex. No one knows what it's going to end up like. This is pretty similar, but the ultimate responsibility that we've got as elected members is to make a hard decision at the end of the day about what we're going to do, and we will have to make a decision one way or the other. And as is probably going to be something that's coming out through the LTP process, that decision isn't going to be liked by all, but that's what we're here to do. So we'll do the best we can to inform people, but I don't know that we should expect that everybody's going to get it. And ultimately we have to make that call, and we better stand by it. And you know, it's not the first one we've done like this, and it won't be the last. There'll be more to come, and we've done a few in the past as well. So you know, I'm sure that with the work that we'll do, and the power of 4, if you like, is much greater than 1 in terms of trying to get that right message out there and the messaging around it and the consistency. So I think it's a good opportunity, and we might surprise ourselves. I think we might get a whole lot of buy-in. Well, that's all I'm hoping for anyway.
Absolutely. Ian?
Where would the joint CCO be based?
That's not been decided. That's a bit further down the track, recognising that you'll need staff in each location to oversee the physical plants and all of that sort of thing. But in terms of if there would be a headquarters or not, and what that would look like or not, and where it would be, that's not been decided or even discussed.
Details of the decision of the meaning of the network would come after decisions are made around receiving the needed object of secrecy. But I know when the previous governments were formed, any of the staff who were located in there and regions will continue on to be located in those places, because the work still has to be delivered in those places. And in today's environment, there's a lot of opportunity to work collectively.
I just had a question around, this is for Morrison Lowe, on the establishment costs of the CCO. You've got in your report about 13.8 million.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, do you think that this is a realistic figure, bearing in mind that we've spoken to other people and they thought that you can establish a CCO relatively easily, and just wondering where you got this figure from?
Yep. Okay. That one's relatively straightforward, and I'm not surprised it's come up because it's come up at the other councils as well. So I think the first point is, yes, we absolutely think that it's realistic that you could establish that it is. We believe that it is an ample and conservative estimate in terms of establishment costs. A big chunk of the cost that is included in there is for an ERP system or an asset management system, and those costs are benchmarked off what other councils, what councils have spent on ERP systems, and then scaled to reflect the size of the entity. So that is over half that total cost is ERP system. That does not need to be purchased for the start of the entity. However, every council has got its own systems and its own processes at the moment. So we would believe that there is, over a long period of time, well, at some point, and probably not too far into the entity's establishment, it will want to move to a single system that is consistent across all of its constituent areas. And of course, given that it is managing almost $1 billion worth of assets, we would expect that it should have good asset management systems and good ERP systems. But like I say, that could be punted till later in the entity's establishment period. The remaining costs relate to the need for a workforce that relates to transition leads, the need to have a establishment entity or a transitional entity set up. Those are all based on estimated staff costs. And again, there are opportunities for councils to look at that and go, well, maybe we can use our own workforce for this to be able to deal with it. But I think the salient point around those establishment costs is they are a number we have used for modelling to be able to demonstrate that the model has got costs provided for in there. we have tried not to silver plate, to sugarcoat or silver plate the entity. So we've used a conservative estimate that we believe is ample to be able to ensure that it can do that. But that is not a final budget for transition costs. That's something that would be worked through with the constituent councils once a decision has been made to actually establish that entity. So yeah, I think if anything, they could be leaning high. At the same time, our efficiencies could be leaning low, although I've also had challenge from, we've got the concept consulting report that says we might have undercooked them. I've had challenge from other people that have said they're too high. So to me, that actually says we got them about right if we've got one person saying they're too high and one person saying they're too low. I will also say that our transitional costs that we've modelled here are broadly consistent with, adjusted for scale, with transition costs used by other consultants for similar sized entities elsewhere in New Zealand, and similar to, and that includes the Waikato water grouping, some of the work done in South Canterbury, some of the work done in Wellington, and I think also some of the work done for the Manawatu-Wanganui region as well. So they're not necessarily significantly too high, but again, it's a number and a model to be able to spit out a price. What we've also been able to demonstrate, or what we've been able to test in that modelling, is that if you reduce those establishment costs, it doesn't have a significant bearing on that long-term price because they're debt funded as well. So we're assuming that everyone will borrow to cover the costs of this establishment. Hopefully that's covered it off a bit, but I'm happy to take more questions on that if you'd like.
No, that was good, and I think just realising that half of it goes in the SME system makes the figure a little bit more realistic, I suppose. I did have one other question just under your recommendation to strengthen the confidence in the financial projections. You recommend that council should commit to a memorandum of understanding or similar to aligned cost estimation methodologies.
Is that my report?
Is that a concept report?
It might be the.
It might be in the concept consulting.
Yeah, sorry. But just, wondering if you've got any comment around that.
Look, I think actually for the next steps, the way that we are working with other groups, so we're working, I mentioned the Wellington group as other consultants. There are other consultants leading that, but we're also working with that, and they're looking to establish it on the 1st of July 2026. There are definitely some things that will need to be worked through in more detail with the councils in terms of alignment of how we deal with certain costs. Development contributions are probably the key one there. They're one of the biggest funding levers for growth, and we need to make sure that they're appropriately modelled within here. But I don't think that necessarily we need to go down that MOU level of working through all that detail at this point to develop that water service delivery plan, which is the key next step. And then obviously that standardisation approach will happen once we start building up that entity. So there'll be a whole finance and funding work stream that has to go through and work out how do we align things. Where is the difference, and that difference is okay? Where is the difference and that difference isn't okay, and how we're going to bring that together. But that's all a work stream for the entity once there's an establishment decision for the entity. So, but you know, at the same time, I've got a lot of respect for those concept consulting people, and it's probably a point where we might just need to have a discussion as we move along about what that looks like and what they think is needed there and why they think that's needed.
I've just covered it's new utility.
It is.
And it was around looking at that. So what the modelling is that Morrison Loan does is the council said come to you for our long-term planning process, so that 10-year plan. So not every council approaches that exercise exactly the same way, and they might have estimated the costs of things using different ways. So that's what they're saying. But I think Stu's right. Once you've made a decision around this is what you want to do, then you start looking at. It's basically that process of doing the next LTP instead of all doing individual ones. You would come together and develop it. That's the decisions we make to do.
My question is around when we go out with the consultation document in 2 syllable words that everyone understands. What, and maybe there's a question for Judy, what weight should we be giving to the fact that by joining a regional entity, we're giving away some of our autonomy as an organisation in terms of being able to prioritise projects. Because instead of deciding what we'll do within CODC, all of a sudden we're now joining a queue that's got 3 other territorial authorities in them. And when this question was asked of Marlon, his answer in effect was, gee, a regional interview was so much more efficient and things will sped up so much that it actually isn't a question that arises, which sounds great. It's an answer that you might take with a grain of salt. So I wonder, Judy, whether how much weight you give to that, to what is a drawback.
I think that because of the economic regulation coming into play, there will be such in growth that the difference we have is we have a lot of growth-driven work. So that is very much set down in the legislation with legal requirements to have infrastructure in place to service growth. So I honestly think the ability to make choices around what gets done, what doesn't get done is going to get quite limited by the type of regulation that's going to be working to meet what's legally required. And because growth is a legal requirement that way as well. So he's right, he will deliver, once this thing gets up and gets its legs, it will deliver capital programs faster, that's the expectations.
So, but it's something in the consultation document that does need to be highlighted. I mean, that's quite, what you're saying is actually quite comforting in terms of the.
Yeah, and that part of the reasons potentially for a CCO is that you would have a competency-based board who would be making decisions based on risk and need, as opposed to based on which community is shouting the loudest that they need this and that, and it removes the politics from water.
Well, Julie saying there's there are criteria you're obliged to work to.
The regulator will be saying
that
these
takes
will
a lot
be
of
priorities based on.
Takes a lot of potential parochialism.
Anything else? Otherwise, I'm happy to move to the recommendations on page 28. Receiving the report and accepting the level of significance, approving option 1, a joint water services CCO as the preferred water services delivery model option for Central Otago District Council to proceed with public consultation on, and approves that the following water service delivery model options also be included in the public consultation as other.
Just lost the sound.
Sounds back.
Getting some feedback. Would somebody like to move though? Thank you, Tracy, and seconded, thank you, Cheryl. All those in favour?
Aye.
Again. Carried. Thank you very much. And that takes us to the end of the formal items and the date of our next meeting, which will be the 30th of April. Not long to wait. And in the meantime, get ready for reading because we have had 99 submissions so far on our long-term plan as of yesterday. 99 adult and 16 youth submissions. Keep them coming, people. We're ready to read. Then we've got my reading. I better just get time. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you to those who joined online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now, are you going to remain? Is it the same?
Yeah.
Perfect. You can stay in the same meeting if you would like. We now have the workshop. Thank you for your patience. Welcome.
Thank you.
Who's running up? Who's up using my?
Someone thought you get on the
See if I can make it a bit bigger.
Easier once you've got control, isn't it? You're driving the spreadsheet.
Really true. So, so this is a continuation of the workshop that we attempted to have a week ago. And as you can see, the numbers are a little bit easier to read on the bigger screen than they were on the TV. So what this is really about is that we've modelled, now that we've got the spreadsheet working properly, we've modelled.
Sorry, Paul, I'll just give you 1 second. Can everybody who's online please mute yourselves? Which feedback.
Everyone's muted.
And then know that's come from.
So what this is really.
Is it coming from someone's computer? It's not.
It's actually, it has to be from, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Right, it's sounding good. But can everybody
Oh, there's famous.
yeah, so it's a delayed feed that's coming through this.
Yeah, but everyone has that.
Are you?
And there's
Are
a
you
link.
muted? Why?
That was I was listening to the meeting online to see when I should come in, and I still had it going, so.
Martha.
It's a little bit of a delay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll make no smart ass comments about numbers, people.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Okay, so we are in a position now, we have the sample properties, the average rates increase after allowing for growth is 13.01%. But there are some things that you, well, one thing you need to comply with, which is the 30% cap, which I talked about last week. Currently, a 30% cap is the uniform annual general charges that are charged to everybody across the district. Now we have two major ones. One is the uniform annual general charge that relates to general rate. And the other one is the community facilities charge. That is the result of the amalgamation of all of the rates that were districtised in September. So we have, we've modelled those. There are there's two other rates that spread across the district. One is the libraries rate. We haven't looked at that at all. It's similar to the general rate in nature, and the other rate that we will be introducing is the stormwater rate. And the reason we're introducing a fixed charge for stormwater is when the new entity will go through the consultation process for local water done well, come 1 July 2027, and the requirement to bill those charges, it's easier to do it as a fixed charge, the same way we currently have water and wastewater. But prior to this, it was charged through a combined rate that had unsubsidised roading in it as well. So we've kind of extracted that, put it into a fixed charge and said that's what we're going to go with. So there's no point in then reverting it back to fixed and variable, because you'll be in the same boat that you're in now in terms of when it comes to 1 July 2027 and actually handing over and doing the billing for it. We really want to be able to just have a fixed charge. So that's, we've left that out. So effectively, we're back to the two rates of the uniform annual general charge, which currently is sitting at $183.04 in the model. It's $122 in this current year that we're currently in, and the new charge of $948.31. That recovers 100% of the community facilities charge. What that does is that it tips us over the 30% cap. We are 30.01%. So we are, if we went out with this rates strike in July, we'd be in breach of the legislation. And that's not a good thing to be doing when you're setting the rates. The other thing that I talked about briefly last week is in relation to when Three Waters revenue, because this is all done on rates revenue. Three Waters is not incorporated into the 30% cap, it's specifically excluded under the legislation, but the revenue is included. You're allowed to include the revenue, but you don't include the fixed charge as part of that calculation. Obviously, all of that revenue is going to potentially go on 1 July 2027. And on today's numbers, what that will do is put our 30% cap, we will be at 41%. So we will be well and truly in breach of that. So what that gives us is a 2-year period between now and 1 July 2027, if that's when it all happens, to start thinking about how we bring down that cap to give us sufficient room for 2027, so the impact on ratepayers is not as harsh as it might have been. Everybody with me on that so far? I'm happy to take questions as I'm talking about it.
I just have a bit of a question and just in relation to the stormwater. So what if I'm hearing you correctly, that there's going to be a fixed charge across the district?
Yes.
Is there any difference between rural and urban?
No, not at this point in time.
So rural is going to be paying the same as urban, even though they don't connect into any.
Well, they get the benefit when they come to town, that sort of thing. It's a $10 charge. It's not significant in terms of $900.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of money needed in stormwater space in the next couple of years. So it would have up to I think we had it 22 if we took rural out. But $10 we thought was not material. I don't like using those terms, but that's the fundamental reason why.
But isn't the reality of that stormwater is mostly off the roads anyway, which is a district charge, so it makes sense that the stormwater, which is largely from the roads, should be then district funded as well? Or am I missing something?
Roads are,
Very few residential properties, even in urban areas, that are formally connected.
So to me, it's perfectly logical that the stormwater network should be funded across the district, given that it's connected to the roading network, which is funded the same way. So
It deals with ground, basically, through urban areas rather than keep connected to the end.
So what I've done, and I have in this particular model, I've also included the potential cost for water usage, but the discussion isn't around the water usage. The discussion is around how we split fixed and variable costs. Water usage will be what water usage will be. So I think that comments have been sort of made in the last week or so about it's quite low rates rises. Those rates rises don't include the volumetric charging. They do in this model, but as I say, will be what it will be through the consultation process. So I've modelled rates only. I've modelled water at $2.40. I've modelled water at $1.80, and I've also modelled 30% reduction at $2.40 and $1.80. So that all ties in with what we're consulting on through our long-term plan consultation document. I've also broken this down into areas, so we can look first up at Alex, and then it goes to Bannockburn, Cromwell, through. So this is the sample properties that we've used forever and a day, and I think it's good that we continue to use them because it gives some continuity for things in the past. So that's why we're using that. And if we chose to change them, we then have to go and remodel everything that has happened in prior LTP senior plans based on the new sample problems. So that's why we're using these ones. I've also put the number of connections in there because that has an impact on fixed charges for water use. And it's appropriate to be able to calculate what the fixed charges would be if you've got more than one water connection. So we know that, and we plug those in as well. So the two columns, the column in green here, that's the UAGC, and that is the community facilities rate. So I'll just scoot across the top there. So the blue, I've tried to isolate them in terms of blocks of colour. So the blue one is just rates only. The kind of peachy colour is the preferred option with water at $2.40, but no savings, because we need to look at that in comparison. It's important to also look here, these columns here, changes from the previous rates and the unadjusted change. Now this is a fixed point, it will not change, but I have put that in there so that when we change the fixed component, those two numbers in the green, it will change this column, and then you can compare the movement between what you're seeing at $183 and $948 to what you might think about. So for argument's sake, if we look at that and I change that to 150, you can see that changes, we're now at 29%. And what that's done is it has moved some revenue requirement from the fixed component of the general rate to the land value component of the general rate. And if you then flick across to this part here, you can see that this one has gone down to 24.38, where it was 24.67. So you can see the movement across each of those samples as you make the changes in those areas. So what you will note is that this one has gone down, but further down you'll see that the higher value properties, and that might be rural, will be rural, has gone up, and because they have a higher land value, so they're picking up more of that fixed charge reduction. We've done an option at $1.80 because that's how we measured that's what's in the consultation document. So I thought it was important that we did that. And you can see that the change from the previous one for the Alexandra commercial, it was 20.4. It's now it was 20.7. It's now 20.41. Same principle.
Can you scroll down a little bit more so we can see the impact on the rural properties?
Yeah, I will. I'll just go across the top and show you, and then I'll go through each one of them. That's okay. And this one got a little bit complicated. This is the alternatives with only 30% drop in water use. And I've modelled $1.80 and $2.40 in the same chart. So it gets a little bit crowded, but at the end, the bits that you want to look at are these last four columns at the end, which this is the $2.40. This is at 30% reduction. You want to remember that. This is the $1.80 at 30% reduction. This is what it was. So given that, so we can scroll right across here and we'll start here. So if we go to, let's look at where have we got? There's a large farm in Cromwell, for argument's sake. So it has, because we've moved the rate from $183.31 or whatever I had the cents in there, down to $150, their rates have gone from 8.62, raw rates, no water, and they don't have water anyway, so they've gone from 8.62 to 11.51. And that is the, I guess that's the consequences of where you're running quite high proportion of fixed charges compared to variable charges. where you need to make the adjustments, such as what we're talking about here, to A, comply with the legislation, and B, potentially reduce the fixed charge to something under the cap that allows you over the next 2 years to still maintain that cap, so that by the time you come to 1 July 2027, you've got, you're still under 30%, rather than going from, we could make this, for argument's sake, I don't know what the number is, but if we go to 170, for argument's sake, 170 is just at 30%, 29.9. But we'll still probably be in the region of 40% in 2 years' time. So there's going to have to be a big drop to bring that down. So if we were looking at, we can find a model it here, and this might be 120. It's only, they say it doesn't make a lot of difference in terms of the overall. I don't know what that is. So we might need to say drop the 948 down to 700. So that's a significant drop. So that was went from 30.1. By moving those, that's dropped us to 22.9. But if you start looking at rates only, the Cromwell Farm has gone from 12 to 27. That's the type of movement that you will have to deal with 1 July 2027. So what I'm suggesting is that you have a staged approach over time, that you start moving this lower. You might start off with 26% as the target you're aiming for. And then the next year, you want to maintain 26%, you've got to do another 5% reduction. So those are the types of things you need to be thinking about going forward. It will impact the high value properties. And that's just fact. It's just the way rates are. They're either struck in fixed, or they're struck on variable through capital value or land value. And they will always benefit larger capital value, land value properties. Fixed charges will always benefit them. And that's why you will always hear, federated farmers, for argument's sake, wanting to push more of the costs into fixed, because it relieves some of the rate burden on their property. Lower fixed charges will benefit smaller value properties, lower value properties, and it will always, your residentials will get the benefit of that lower value property.
And when we're talking about those larger properties, we're not just, it's the value, isn't it? So we're not just talking about large farms, we're talking about large commercial properties, vineyards, hotels.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
And Paul, just 1st of July 2027, water charge, assuming we establish a CCR of some description, water charges and that sort of stuff go, how does we're no longer into that 30% sort of?
No, we are. What will happen is that you will have whatever you have in July in 2026 or year to date June 30 June 2027. So when you set the rates for that particular year, you will still be including your three waters. So we will be 30% be based on effectively your $63 million worth of revenue. So that means that it's a higher level that you can recover from fixed charges. We're going to lose three waters, and say you lose, say it's 25 million. I don't know what we're going to have off the top of my head. So we go from, so 63 down to, so say 40. So you're only allowed 30% of $40 million now, which means that where you were at 30% of 60, you've got that gap that is really, it will convert into a 41% level that you're at, but you still have to comply at this point in time with 30%. So if the legislation changes, that's different, but currently in the Rating Act, that's where we're sitting. So The other thing that we need to think about is this information is taken at a point in time. Between, when we run this, probably March, I think this over March. So we ran this in March, and this is currently that day. So if we get, we haven't got many at the moment, and if we may or may not get new subdivisions obtaining title between March and June, we need to factor in that increase as well, because if you take a section, a large subdividable section, it pays one new AGC and it's valued at whatever its value, and the capital value is charged at whatever it comes out at. If we suddenly get 50 sections out of that, we're now getting 50 UAGCs charged. So we've got an increase of 49, which means that has the potential to impact the cap. Even though the land value will be higher for the 50 sections, because, you know, it's more, the smaller they are, the more valuable they are. You have to subtract from the total of that the existing land value. So the impact is not as high as it would be in getting 49 new UAGCs coming on, potentially. So we need to leave a little bit of leeway in the 30% calculation, and we can do that as we go through for when you're ready for your long-term plan deliberations, because this really gets talked about at that time. If we've got stuff that starts coming in, then we'd be having a different conversation. If you wanted to say, let's keep it up at 28 or 29, when we talk about it in June, if you find that we've got a few coming in, we'd probably be looking at, well, we can't go to 28 or 29, we'd have to come down, because all of these things are going to add to our rates cap into the future. And that future is from 1 July when they're rateable. So it all depends on when it comes into being rateable. Now, I know that there was comments made last week about it might not be significant, and we should know. Yeah, we should know, but that will depend on developers putting stuff through. We don't need to make, as I said, we don't need to make that decision right now, but we need to be aware that that's a possibility, and we'll be able to tell you how many new sections we've got that will come in on stream from 1 July 2025.
What do you think the sweet spot is for looking at that, something below 30%, or are we not going to know until closer to June?
It's really difficult to, no matter what we do, given we've got 13.01% average, and as you know from last year, we had 18, I think, but we had some people who had 30% increase and some people who had a small increase. You're still going to have those swings and roundabouts. So it kind of depends whether you want to, say urban got hit last time. We don't want to do that again, in which case you reduce the fixed charge and the balance goes on to the higher capital value and land value properties, and they wear what they wear. Or you might want to say we're looking at, 13.01 is high. The water volumetric charging is going to impact some people quite significantly in that high capital value space. We might want to try and offset some of that. So there's a bunch of things that you need to consider. And I can't really say what's the sweet spot. It's difficult, and given there are still some decisions to be made in terms of what the volumetric charging level sits at, because that obviously impacts the fixed charge for water that will go up if the volumetric charge comes down, how strong the community feedback is on those types of things. So I think sweet spot's not quite there yet. I think it's just we need to be looking at two things. We've got to get in under the cap now regardless, and that's going to impact higher capital value properties. And we've got to think about what's going to happen in the next 2 years when ultimately Three Waters goes.
So what happens if we set the rates and you get it wrong and it comes in at over 30%? What is the consequence of that?
I think, and I'd have to check with our lawyers, but thinking about the cap and how setting rates is we had that problem with our rates resolution that could have been disastrous for us if the legal, if our advice had been different, legal advice had been different. There's potential for challenging your rate strike. That's why I'm really, I'm acting very conservatively when I say we need to give ourselves some headroom for a start, and we definitely need to comply.
Yeah, I'm standing too close to the window.
Well,
but I understand the question remains, but if whatever the good intention it goes wrong, is it a slap on the wrist from all of you?
No, I think that, well, see, potentially what could happen is if it's wrong, you then get into the point of resetting your rates. You have to comply with legislation.
Within the current year.
Within the current year. So if that's the case, then we don't have a valid rate strike. And I've not been down that track, so I don't know, but if your rates aren't correct, then you have, and you don't find out about it until, there's two options here. You find out about it and say, whoops, that's a problem, we have to fix it. And it's not, should we fix it, as we must fix it. Or we go and 12 months rolls around and then the auditors come in and they look at it and say, hey, you didn't do that right. Then potentially we're into correcting legislation to validate our rate strike.
I don't think we want to be anywhere near the rate strike.
I mean, yeah, so it's not just a slap in the wrist.
It's not, no, it's
just for a world of trouble.
Yes, it's not the sort of thing that you, like, if you don't do a section 17A review, which is Local Government Act, you need to do those every 6 years. I've never heard of a council getting pulled over the coals for doing that, but rates
are sacrosanct.
It's pretty serious if you get that wrong, then it's embarrassing for the council, and potentially a long process to restrike. And then you've got the whole intervening thing, and if you leave it for too long, then it's legislation.
You want to get it right.
You want to get it right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Oh, we'll be covering that off then in the next little while. Something to be thinking about.
And on that, from a governance point of view, is this an issue that is going to go to Local Government New Zealand, or has gone? Because it's clearly going to be a structural issue with
once water potentially goes, and we can talk about it.
I mean, it's quite a fundamental issue, isn't it?
And the thing about that, you can see, and Three Waters going back on effective the council who pass it on. I'm not sure the impact on keeping it in an in-house business unit. The legislation from the Rating Act talks about total revenue from council type of thing. So I guess that an in-house business unit wouldn't have necessarily the same problem, but passing it on to a CCO definitely causes problems.
Separated financials.
Yeah. So in terms of this model, I'm sure you don't want me to go through each one of those. What I can do is make the spreadsheet available now that I've made it look pretty and got all the colours in to give you various options. The two things that you want to be dealing with are those two green numbers there. So you can put in what you want. So you might put in 90 there, and it will change all of those through and update the capital value as well as the fixed charges. So it's you can see what the impact of your sort of decisions would be. But we will need to be sitting down at rate setting time, and that's probably going to be through the LTP hearings process and finalising this so that you can complete your LTP, because we've got to put some properties in, so it'll be what you want to do at that point in time. And then we can set the rates. The rates resolution will come out of those discussions, and that will be what we will see.
When will you be able to get that out to us?
I'm looking at that. I can look at send it out this afternoon, so you can, if you're interested to play with it over the weekend, you've got nothing else to do.
Thank you.
So in theory, if you wanted to keep below the 30% cap, one of the options is to increase service charges for the particular activities like a pool or a library.
Yep, that's, I mean, what we've done is we've built the budget around certain assumptions. And that one of those assumptions is what we're going to charge in fees and charges for argument's sake. If you want to get more revenue to be brought into the business through fees and charges, that would impact the rates requirement, which would then flow into this calculation here. Yeah.
I think that's something we should keep in mind, because.
And the fees and charges schedule was in there.
I mean, the decisions you're going to be making over things like the turfs, the halls, you know, we've taken the halls out. If you add the halls back in, that will impact this. If you take the turfs out, that will change that as well. So all of those decisions with the exception of the water stuff, or if you change it to $1.80 or whatever level you want to put it at, that's also modelled in. I haven't modelled anything below $1.80 because I could be doing that. It'd be huge. So.
Thank you.
We got there.
We did. The colour coordination is helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Right, thanks.
Can I comment on something?
Of course, yep.
Paul, the assumption you've made that there'll be a 30% drop in water usage if we go with the $2.40 per cubic metre. I've had quite a bit of feedback from our public meeting last night from gardeners, and being one myself, I don't think you can get any drier verges around town, and most of us when we first brought in water charges, majority of keen gardeners put controlled irrigation systems in when they're only watering at nights, and those who don't care stopped watering. I don't know if I don't think you're going to see that 30% drop in usage. I think people have already made those lifestyle changes.
Out of balance.
I've got Julie here because Julie's been here a lot longer than I have.
So what you're saying is correct there, Martin, and that's what we thought when we first started looking at this. And if you'll recall, when I presented to council, when they had like a 20% reduction rather than a 30% reduction, there has been some creep up probably happening, because as new people come in here and the cost's not great, they won't be thinking about it this much. But right, that there were a lot of people who put measures in when it first happened that will still be running those measures, so they don't have the opportunity to reduce their water use the same. What we think it'll be is those very, very large water users may decide to move off the council supply. You know, those ones, what was it, you always put it, is it 8%?
8% is 42%.
Yeah.
Your lifestyle blocks in Let's Gully Road is a classic example.
Yeah, So
Yeah.
that's where we think, because we, Paul and I had quite a rigorous conversation around this, and then, we actually had, and my team had done a whole lot of modeling on different scenarios of different types of water users, making different levels of reductions, and we think that the biggest reduction will come in those very high water users rather than.
Including us.
Okay, okay, that's where your thinking's going, because I don't think you're going to see much change in your average section, average gardener. I think they've made the changes already when we first brought in charges. Yeah,
But
okay.
we suspect we won't see much more than 30% reduction on some of the big ones, because they might just move, they might get 50% or just move off the towns.
That 30% reduction is really a budgetary, primarily a budgetary figure. Because what you're saying, Julie, is if we put these charges in, we can afford to have a 30% reduction in usage and still have sufficient revenue to run the service.
Yeah,
That's the whole.
we have to look at it from a financing point of view,
Yeah.
as far as infrastructure. You know, you're reducing demand, which is what our objective is for that. But if you're charging mechanism is based on selling that quantity of water, and then you get 30% less.
So that 30% is really a buffer, an insurance buffer zone.
To
Yeah.
fund your activities, so we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there may be an adjustment in year 2 once this is being in. We'll see how it goes.
Very much. Thank you to those who joined online.
Thank you.
To wrap up the whakarakia.
Whakataka hau ki te uru, whakataka hau ki tonga kia mātina, kina ki uta, kia mātara ki te. E hi aki ana ta atakura, teo, te puka, i ohu, te hei Māori.
Thank you very much. Thank you to those who joined us. Thanks, Julie. If elected members can remain